laps and roses, whiskers on kittens, white copper kettle, warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with string. These are a few of my favorite things. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and my lashes, silver white winters that melt into spring. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
Before there is the next significant step here. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT.
Well, you know, to be honest with you, I can't tell you that. It's certainly going to be measured in years. I mean, some people, when they hear an announcement like this, they think, well, next year we're going to wind up having a vaccine. That's not only extraordinarily unlikely, it's virtually impossible that that's going to happen. It's going to be measured in years. I can't tell you how many years, but if we had this conversation 6 months ago and you asked me that, I would say I can't even tell you if we're even ever going to get a vaccine.
We are killing 180,000 people with ACT. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT.
Now at least I have some cautious optimism that we're on the right path, but I can't put a number.
We are killing 180,000 people with ACT. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT. We are killing 180,000 people with ACT.
Now at least I have some cautious optimism that we're on the right path, but I can't put a number for you about how many years.
Hey everybody, it's a great day in Greenwich Village, bit brisk and sunny, and I am Yvette Jody Stark, and I've been living here for 34 years. And I want to go back to talking about my reflection and having a historical background and content from living here. And I kind of want to focus on the AIDS epidemic that occurred here in Greenwich Village, which was targeted primarily to the gay men in the village. But a lot of women got AIDS too because sexual promiscuity was rampant, and everybody was having sex with everybody, and it was a free-for-all. And isn't that lovely? Because there was a lot of love.
Depends on perspective. That can be a good thing and some may perceive it as a bad thing.
But all of a sudden, this monkey caused AIDS, and gay men in the village started to get skinny.
Well, so some people who are not as, some people who aren't around that period may not get what you implied, that that the cause was placed on ridiculously a monkey, right?
Exactly.
Because young people may not get that reference.
Yes, and let me point out that the experimental testing on all of us all over the globe, and especially the mandates promoted by our governor and mayor in New York City, is referencing some bat in Wuhan, right? Mm-hmm. The bat has caused all of these issues, and we know there's so many other stories that have come about, and because there is social media and the internet and alternative forms of information presented, we can for ourselves ascertain that today we have been experimented on, much like the gay community was during the late 80s and early 90s of AZT testing and AZT drugs in an effort to cure AIDS. And hey, everybody, is AIDS cured today? No. Okay, the answer is no for all you young people out there.
Because a lot of people aren't aware of the AZT situation back then. Could you go into a little bit about what you understand about it and your personal experience with it?
My understanding about AZT came about not just because I had friends tanning around the corner and at Uncle Charlie's and at the Dewdrop Inn, but because Tom Courtcamus, a flaming red-headed gay man, was a super in my building, who was adored in my building at Unadilla. He kept the building immaculate. He was fantastic. And he was an ex-Trappist monk. And he always had boyfriends. And there was a lot of naked people running in the building, clothes thrown out of basement windows. It was very flamboyant. And at that time, Jill Goodacre and her husband kind of hung out with us in the basement when we had second Thanksgivings, and models hung out with us, and also Jill Revson, who was heir to the Revson empire and actually owned an apartment across the street from Carnegie Hall with no furniture, but a lot of candles lit in bags where we had parties. So it was a very interesting time, interesting building filled with really intelligent people. One of my neighbors, Alyssa Van Rosen, she paid equity actors for commercials and lived down the hall. So just an interesting building, And in reference to AZT, all of a sudden, a lot of people that we knew in the neighborhood were skinny, weren't showing up, couldn't shop, couldn't feed themselves, and all of a sudden, God's Love We Deliver came about. And ironically, in the October issue of Westview News, it's very bizarre having this interview and having this come up, that God's Love We Deliver, I believe, is utilizing the Northern Dispensary now as maybe their location in this article. So
we are killing 180,000 people with AZT. We are killing 180,000 people with AZT. We are killing 180,000 people with AZT.
It was the October 2022 edition of the Westview News, George Capsis's publication, and my friend Dusty Burke got the photo credit here. I just want to say that. She's been a friend of mine for many years. So let me
just tie it. We're talking with Rich.
Science in this country and science in the world is to be democratic. All voices could be heard to find the truth. In particular, if we don't have the truth, if a hypothesis is as totally bankrupt as the virus hypothesis that hasn't saved one single life, we are killing 180,000 people with AZT. We are paying an army of 50 to 100,000 scientists who cannot even predict the spread of AIDS. That is the time to say, where's our market economy? Does that make sense? Is the patient getting its dollars worth of treatment? The answer is clearly no. There is no hypothesis in biology that has been so unproductive, so unable to predict anything as the virus AIDS hypothesis. It is time to stand up and say, to call for alternatives. But it's difficult to do in our country because medical science is now a totalitarian field. Because medical science is now a totalitarian field. Because medical science is now a totalitarian field. It is entirely regulated. The money is entirely distributed from one institution, that's the National Institute of Health. And they have made up their minds before even one paper had been published on the subject in 1984, as we discussed half an hour ago, when Reagan was to be re-elected, and Gallo and Margaret Eckler announced the cause of AIDS had been found before one single study had been published. The papers that have subsequently been published by Gallo were since all shown to be fraudulent, fabricated material, because medical science is now a totalitarian field. Because medical science is now a totalitarian field. Because medical science is now a totalitarian field is entirely distributed from one institution, that's the National Institute of Health. And they have made up their minds before even one paper had been published on the subject in 1984, as we discussed half an hour ago, when Reagan was to be re-elected, and Gallo and Margaret Heckler announced the cause of AIDS had been found before one single study had been published. The papers that had subsequently been published by Gallo were since all shown to be fraudulent, fabricated material, because medical science is now a totalitarian field. Because medical science is now a totalitarian field. Because medical science is now a totalitarian field.
He spoke about Rich initially. He said he didn't understand what was going on, his brother George, that he just started passing out. And
Right.
then he came to understand that when he went to doctors, they said that he had AIDS. They had no idea what it was. So,
Right.
and then he just never recovered.
Well, St. Vincent's Hospital across the street, which Bill Rudin now has $3,000 square foot condos that he ended up buying, 800,000 square feet of the property for pennies on the dollar. St. Vincent's was supposed to be retrofitted, and at the last minute, that didn't happen. So there was an AIDS floor, is what I want to say, because you're saying, people were just passing out and getting sick. Yeah, nobody knew.
Well, that was just what George. I had no understanding. This is what Rich Deegan said about his brother George. That's how he just started passing out because he didn't know he was sick. That's how he understood he wasn't well, and then he was diagnosed with AIDS.
No, that's very interesting.
And he never recovered his health, and he died.
Right. Well, that's an interesting observation.
Because I know you said you guys were taking care of your friend.
Well, for a little bit. I didn't take care of him a lot. He
Yeah.
had a lot of gay men taking care of him.
Yeah.
I had 2 young children at the time. So I was a very busy mother, and I still own my graphic art company. So I was working, dealing with twins, my chocolate lab. So I was a busy woman. I checked in. I saw he was taking some medication. He did not improve and did not get better. And, many men in the village were thin, had some cuts on their bodies, and you saw them in the street going into St. Vincent's, coming out, because there was an AIDS floor. So, initially, nobody did know what was going on.
And you mentioned that St. Vincent, was it run by nuns at the time?
Yeah, it was the Sisters of St. Vincent.
Sisters of St.
And then,
Vincent, okay.
and it was running in the black and not in the red at that time. And they took in anybody who needed to come in.
And it was understood that they were doing that prior, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there was also fear in the village with a lot of the families about AIDS.
No, you just brought something up that I had forgotten that Richie spoke about, that it seems to be a key. He said that when his brother came home, there was such a label put on people with AIDS that his mom wouldn't even acknowledge that his brother had it, and was actually had shame about it.
Right.
And he was kind of blackballed or listed, or whatever you want the word term is,
you know,
in his own home by his mother.
Disgusting.
So anyway.
It was disgusting at the time. People were afraid of people with AIDS, including some of the families even in the village who just, if you're not smart and you don't reach out for alternative news, then you believe everything you hear. But we didn't have, the internet then. So it's only now, so many years later, from the 80s until now, 2022. And actually, I've been talking about this since 2019, that, Fauci's the Mengele of our generation and our children's generation.
Could you understand this well? I've heard you talk about this many times.
Oh, yeah.
But for people that maybe don't even have an understanding that Fauci was a part of pushing AZT during the AIDS crisis, could you break it down in simple terms, how that relates to today?
He was part of pushing AZT testing and drugs, which had false negatives and false positives. And Dr. Judy Mikovits, I think her information relating to the research
Is
on
this COVID or
AIDS.
is it AIDS? It's AIDS as well.
It was AIDS. She ended up being removed from the institution that he was affiliated with and working at. And I can't remember all these 3-letter names. But,
Yes.
and she has her own story about him. And of course, there's a book now written about him by Children's Defense Fund author Robert F. Kennedy, too.
Children's Health Defense, yes.
Right, Children's Health Fund about Fauci. But she has a historical perspective and was put in jail for like 5 years so that she would not speak about what was going on with this AIDS experimentation. So again, like the gay community was lab rats, which I often say when I speak in Union Square, hey, lab rats, pay attention, because we've all been coerced into taking these bioweapon vaccines. And then it wasn't necessarily coercion, we just believed in the science. The science was going to save us all. And it really is about, we know today, making Big Pharma rich, and maybe even the Rothschilds and big banking. But I kind of want to talk about, like, it was the Walking Dead in the village, and there were a lot of really sick men. And then this fantastic organization started to cook and go feed men, because there's a lot of walk-up apartments in New
And what is
York.
that organization?
God's Love We Deliver. And I remember writing a donation check to them. I remember that, and I thought, wow, that's fantastic. And I never delivered food. I know I wanted to. I just couldn't with two kids and a dog and, my own crazy life with business. But I knew about what was going on.
So could you share a little bit, because people don't understand about how it was being here at that time period, during that time, when people were unaware and this crisis took place, and what was a little bit of that experience?
People were vanishing, like, it's really funny because I'm older and I don't remember everybody's name, but you would walk into Uncle Charlie's and it would be that. It would be Jake, it would be, Simon.
Because it's part of your community.
Yeah, like, you knew people. It was so weird that, and then, like, a lot of people sort of weren't around anymore. And then, people talked about it, but again, there was a stigma, as you said, even in the gay community. There was a stigma, Robert's, not well. Not going to be around here, or Joseph's in the hospital, and to this day, I mean, people are taking medications through the pharmaceutical industry to manage whatever form of AIDS. I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, I'm just somebody who lived in the community.
And I think that's what we need to speak a little, people who have had experience, because we are relying a little bit too much on experts, and this is someone like yourself who had a personal experience with that, and a relationship. Could you talk a little bit about your friend who unfortunately passed away? Yeah,
I mean, he was the super in my building. He was ridiculously smart, an ex-Trappist monk. He also, was an advocate for peace, and, had a sketchy past because of that. But he was an ex-Trappist monk. I mean, he stayed in the hills and made jelly, whatever ex-Trappist monks do.
Did he take AZT, or
he took medication related to AIDS at that time, and the only organization and person that was pushing that was Fauci, Dr. Fauci. He was like the be-all and the end-all and was going to cure AIDS. And, to this day, you don't know. Was he actually giving people AIDS with the medication, like today with these vaccines, where you have graphene oxide causing blood clots, in the heart and the brain, where there's myocarditis happening today, and like 9 pages of side effects that I can't list, but you can go on the CDC website and find that. So it seemed to me that there was, it was like a lab rat testing of what they can do to annihilate a small population, that gay male population. And again, some women, had AIDS. And I still know somebody who's taking medication today who's a dancer with AIDS, who's my age, 65.
Wow. And I think you made a clear point. Has it been cured? And the answer is clearly no.
No, and it's really about feeding, I think, big pharma and feeding all of the people in Congress and the Senate and our judges and lawyers who maybe are on the inside track and part of that private club that George Carlin talks about to invest in all these organizations and these medical organizations and doctors investing. So they all get rich on people getting sick and dying. It's a pretty morbid way to think about our medical industry and people dying on respirators and being paid $100,000 by the government if they were diagnosed with COVID, which of course there is no way to test for COVID. And whoever won the Nobel Peace Award for the testing that they're using basically has said don't use it. But, St. Vincent's was a vibrant institution and people got as much help as they could. And we protested the closing of that hospital because there is no hospital on the west side of Manhattan.
Okay.
So we all don't count, basically, on the west side of Manhattan, too. It's an interesting kind of commentary on the population here. And this man, George Kapsis, who's very old now and the publisher of Westview News, has been fighting for a hospital since St. Vincent's closed.
Okay. So, if you wanted to round it up and close it out, what would you want to leave people with?
Well, I just want to say that I don't know if Tom really had AIDS or not. I don't know if he was given AIDS by taking medication through the testing of AZT-type drugs. That's what I want to say, because it's so many years later, and we know that Big Pharma is a big corporation that needs to make money and needs to be fed. And, beyond the corruption of judges and lawyers creating immunity.
Immunity for who?
For like Pfizer and Merck and
Okay.
all of these vaccine companies. And again, it's not a vaccine. These are bioweapons that are slowly killing people. And I don't need to go into all the details. Everybody needs to do their own research. But, it's not good to have formaldehyde put into you and dead baby fetuses and, graphene oxide, which is causing blood clots.
Well, it's very clear to Alexandra Latiapova just recently. I think the grand jury has had, I think it's called a deep dive, down a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
And she worked
yeah.
for Big Pharma, and Pfizer actually hired her. And she said, like you just said, that there are many foreign objects and many, even the testing with the FDA, when what would be a proper testing to bring something to market, they totally took out the toxicology aspect of the testing, which is insane. She says there's no way this should be on the market, from their standards.
Yeah, if you called like poison control and you went down every item that I know is in some of these vaccines, because they're all different, like almost every item would be like, no, don't take that. And if you gave that to your own child with the court system, you would have your kid ripped away from you for child abuse. If you gave any of those chemicals to your own child, which is a whole nother topic about child trafficking and many parents being thrown in jail for not wearing masks or not giving their kids a vaccine, with medical freedom people who have marched in the streets for having their own choices to do what to do with our bodies. I said this before, my dad landed on Omaha Beach, on D-Day, the Normandy invasion, for our flag, for our freedom. There's no way anybody's going to tell me what to do. Don't shut a business down. Don't take anything that the government is telling you to put in your body. You have to have your own choice. And I don't think that the AIDS epidemic, I don't think young men and women at the time had choices. I don't think they had choices.
And certainly people didn't have information regarding what was going on.
No, and we believe the science. Today, we don't believe the science. We know the science lies. And the science lies for profitability, maybe for trafficking. I'm not sure, but I do know the Red Cross is not separating vaccine blood from blood that's already been bioweaponed, okay? And that really disturbs me about the Red Cross. So, when I talk to you about, AIDS and AZT testing and the community, there's so many other tentacles here, You've got courts and judges writing laws for immunity, and you can't even sue a judge if they take your child or take your land or, destroy your life because they have immunity. Nobody has immunity. We have a constitution, and we have a Bill of Rights and a constitution, you know what I mean? And that's what should be utilized to rule our civilization and in the United States. We were given tools to respect each other and to abide by the law, and not to steal property, take children, kill people with bioweapons or with wrong information for the gay community. I think that was like a little testing site for what was to come down the line.
So now to break it down even a little bit further, just for people who are new to all of this, and just a short, I guess to finish closing it up.
Yeah.
What would you want people to know about AZT, that time period, and what is happening today? Just like on a kind of introductory level.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I hate to say this, but the people who chose to be in fear and manipulated and thought that they were going to be harmed or were ill with AIDS, just reached for the science and trusted the government and trusted all these agencies that don't necessarily have our best interests in mind. They are corporations, and they have a bottom line, and they have investors, who invest in their corporations. So it's not always about our best interests. We are the enslaved population here, and they have been trying to separate us and divide us, so that there's more of an element of wealth and then more of an element of just worker bees trying to pay off their mortgage, trying to pay their medical bills at the time. I mean, if you didn't have, if you didn't have medical, I mean, I remember the medication was very expensive at that time, as medication is today. So if you didn't have insurance, you were paying a lot of cash for experimental drugs that were not necessarily working and could be killing you. I don't know what.
And that's something that happened as well. People don't realize. Like, a lot of the young people who had AIDS were people who were active in the community, that were artists, that were making their money. That once they got sick, they didn't have their strength to make a living, so they lost everything.
Yeah, and again, I think it was like an experimental groundwork then. And I think the Holocaust, even before that, because of all the experimentation that went on with twins and men and women medically during that time, which was, diabolical, we found out later. I mean, it's never gone away. It's never gone away. It started in Germany. And, Operation Paperclip came here, and I don't know where all these German scientists went who got new identifications, new IDs, new addresses, and how our medical industry, engineering industry was infiltrated by these scientists, and what they knew in MK Ultra, in, twin study, about or sleep studies about keeping people awake or something, 48 hours. So it just feels like that medical experimentation has continued to this day with us, with you and me. And the people that have not, this is loud, the people that have chosen to not be vaccinated, I think we're the Matrix and we're the news. We're the people who understood that you don't need to do this. Nobody tells you what to do in the United States. In other countries, I feel very sorry for people because sometimes they don't have a choice and there's police brutality forcing them to be locked down, stay in the house. But in the United States, we have more of a background that comes from a revolution. You know, whether we won or not, because that's questionable today, we know with banking and the UK, but we have a flag, we have a Pledge of Allegiance, which I said every day when I went to school. Many people don't even know what the Pledge of Allegiance is. Every day I said this.
Someone would say even maybe people don't understand the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah,
or what with the principles of freedom, which we're supposed to be standing upon.
Even though it was written by Freemasons. Sorry.
Well,
but at the time, what they were talking about was a way to operate a nation that was free from religious persecution, right? Because that was about religious persecution.
Well, just one aspect. I mean, it's really, from my understanding, it's in direct opposition of divine right to rule.
Yeah.
You know, that's so, which is part of religious.
But, you know, because I have a connection to, I don't know everything about World War II, but I know my dad, and I know my cousin served in the air, and my dad was on the ground, a military intelligence sergeant. You know, these people saw horrible things. They landed on beaches where Germans were shooting at them and body parts were flying, and it was red water. You know, nobody talks about that. Just like the World Trade Center, a lot of the news that everybody saw was edited. Ugly stuff, very ugly stuff. And I think the AIDS epidemic was edited a lot as well. As maybe it was censorship then, I don't know. But we know today that I'm being censored. We're all being censored who are conservatives and have a different viewpoint. Even though I put all of these Democrats in office for 40 years, we're being censored. And we're not putting up with it. People are not putting up with it today, and people are waking up because of social media, because we can email 100 people at a time and say, hey, look at this doctor, look what they're saying. But when the gay community here, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't have that form of communication, or it wasn't used appropriately, and we were very gullible and trusting of medical science because, you know, in years past, like polio went away and the mumps and measles went away, so there was like evidence that these people were good, but they were infiltrated somewhere with greed, with people who were greedy and who were psychotic and narcissist and didn't care about humanity, children, grandparents, seniors, or the middle class.
So, and he had a rent-controlled apartment, and I said the landlord was a lady, and he told me the landlord and the landlady never bothered to collect the rent because she said, I have money, I don't need money, I just bought a building in the village because I want to hang out with the hippies. I want to talk to them, I want to hear their stories. So he told me the woman used to be like, well, just bake me some dinner and that'll pay the rent. I don't care about it. I don't need any money. And that would never happen today. The landlord would never be like, well, can I bake you some dinner for the rent? Would that be good enough? So things like that don't exist anymore, but they did.
So that's some of the good aspects.
That's some wonderful aspects of the village back then, which doesn't exist anymore. Everybody's either old, dead, or sold out.
So there was an event where there was things being thrown out a window and an arrest.
Yeah.
Would you want to go into that?
Yeah,
or?
Sure. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. When I left, I thought it was for life. I knew I couldn't endure another beating. No longer would I have to endure the beating and menace of a bigoted, close-minded bully and his demented partner in child abuse. My story begins when I was 15 years old. My family life couldn't handle it anymore. I made a decision. It was time to leave home and look for a safe haven. That straw hat finally broke the camel's back, and almost mine occurred late one cold February night. My father started a fight with me that quickly grew physical. I ran outside to escape his wrath. He locked the door behind me. What he didn't know was that two of my friends were still in the house. While sneaking them out the basement window, my father thought it was me coming in and attacked them with a chair. We all just barely escaped with nothing but our teenage pride damaged. So he decided at 15, his family was not useful anymore. So he decided, well, there must be something better, but there wasn't. In the end, he never made it to Boys Town.